I vividly remember the first time that someone had asked me what was wrong with me or if I could show them my wrists. I had gotten involved with alternative subcultures and gotten into alternative fashion when I was around 4th grade, which was very young. So many people my age had not had interactions with alternative people before and had only been told to stay away from people like that, or if someone dresses that way, they're depressed or suicidal, which is frankly incorrect. Before me, there were people who were alternative who got bullied a lot worse. I know that especially after the tragedy at Columbine, there were a lot of alternative people being targeted for bullying because people thought that they were going to do another Columbine, which was very incorrect. With that anecdote behind us, hello, my name is Peachy and welcome to my channel. Today, as you might have guessed, we're talking about subcultures. More specifically, we're talking about alternative subcultures. Lately on social media, TikTok especially, it's been a bit of a trend for people to call themselves alternative or alt for short. This isn't inherently wrong, and it's kind of necessary for a lot of people within the alternative community, as a lot of people feel like they fit into too many subcultures, that choosing one label is kind of difficult, even if they identify more of certain subcultures than others. And it's kind of easier for some people to just explain that they're alternative rather than using specific labels that might confuse people, like, oh, I'm grunge, or I'm emo, or I'm goth. That might confuse people who don't know anything about alternative subcultures. So it's a necessary label for a lot of people. But due to certain people who wouldn't generally be considered alternative, or just people who are misinformed on what being alternative is, have been calling themselves that, which has misconstrued and made the word lose some meaning. And that's kind of been a case of discourse lately within the alternative community. First off, it can be a little bit confusing what a subculture is specifically. I mean, you see people talking about them, but you might not know what they are. They're defined as a cultural group within a larger culture, often having been brought together by similar ideas or things. There are many different kinds of subcultures, but alternative subcultures are based from specific genres of music that evolved from rock music. There are many ideologies and movements often associated with these subcultures, and even more so, fashion styles. It is a common misconception that alternative subcultures are just fashion-based, which is, they are not. That's just wrong. Music is the core of all alternative subcultures, and that has been consistent. That's kind of what gives the meaning to it, because you could definitely say that, oh, being a hippie is alternative, but people generally like to refer to alternative subcultures as emo, goth, scene, grunge, punk, all that, which, you know, generally, if you really want to generalize the whole group, it's generally the people who look scary and, you know, this kind of stuff, you know? Regardless, many e-kids, e-boys, and e-girls have all begun to call themselves alternative, or alt, which has caused a majority of the discourse going on within the alternative community. And while I don't want to say that they won't ever become their own subculture, because there isn't a sole music group, like music genre, that they're based from, and that they kind of just happened as a trend on TikTok, and it seems that they are just a trend, I wouldn't call them alternative. I don't think most people would call them alternative, because alternative, again, refers to music-based subcultures, and that can be a little confusing for some people, but music-based means you need to listen to the music to be a part of it. And some people might call people who've been in the alternative community longer that that's gatekeeping, that it's rude to tell people they aren't alternative for not listening to alternative music, which, you see the point? The thing is a lot of alternative people are not gatekeeping. I do think there is some gatekeeping within the alternative community, and that has been an issue, where a lot of people just getting into different alternative subcultures feel driven away because people are gatekeeping and they're saying, oh no, you're too young, you can't get into it, which is, you know, it happens. But for the most part, when people are saying that e-girls, e-boys, e-kids in general aren't alternative, they're speaking the truth. It's not a music-based subculture, and it's not really, doesn't fit the alternative brand as a whole. It does have like edgy clothing, like you see girls wearing, you know, fishnets or, you know, striped stockings or gloves, which have been in other subcultures. Fishnets are basically in every alt subculture you can think of. I remember for a long time I associated like striped stockings and stuff with emo and scene, and there's so many examples, but it's a lot more toned down than what some people would say, which I'm more toned down than what some people might say is alt, because dressing up is exhausting, and you don't have to dress up all the time if you're alternative. I mean, there's days where I just wear a hoodie and sweatpants because it's so much work. But overall, the e-kid culture that's kind of being cultivated right now isn't really resembling other alternative subcultures. So, why did I make this video? Why have I been rambling on for like 7 minutes? Well, I figured that a lot of people who are newer to alternative subcultures, or might be interested in them, or might be the friends who I beg to watch this, might want to educate themselves on how to be alternative. I mean, I feel like a lot of e-kids might have been misled on, you know, being alternative, and I feel like as a result, a lot of them, they want to be alternative, but they don't really know where to start, and it seems like everyone's just mean and gatekeeping. And of course, I do think it's still very much a trend. There are people from my school I've seen wear black lipstick and call themselves goth. So I know very well that it's kind of a trend to call yourself alternative right now. But I do think there are people who want to educate themselves. Starting out can be really difficult, especially if you have a more strict family, or you're worried about being judged or losing friends. I've been there, I know what it's like, so I can understand having anxieties around things like that. And truthfully, there's no harm in having those anxieties. I feel like they're generally normal. When I first started being alternative, I had people asking if I was suicidal or depressed for no reason other than the fact I was dressing, that I was dressing different. And I had people asking me to show them my wrists for no reason. Like, it's not even their business. And that can be really intimidating, which hopefully that stuff happens less now. I've kind of stopped caring what people think, so I've kind of blocked out everything. But I know that bullying can still happen, and people can still be judgmental and rude. Another reason why people might be scared to start out and try to get into alt, they might think, oh, I'm too old to get into alternative subcultures. That's usually something kids do in their teenage phase. They're like, oh, yeah, I'm a teenager, I need to rebel from my parents, so, you know, I'm gonna shave half my head and get a bunch of piercings and dye my hair and all that, which isn't true. There are people who are from the original, like, first wave of alternative people in the 70s and late 60s who are still alternative to this day. So it's very much not you're too old for this. And some people might think, oh, well, you know, I'm pretty young, which is fine. I understand that. When you're young, it can be hard to figure that kind of stuff out, and labeling yourself, it's like you just want to fit in, so you want labels. I was in 4th grade, which I think was around like 10 years old when I first got into alternative subcultures, but I had been interested in them way longer. I remember very vividly when I was little telling my mom that I wanted the iconic emo haircut with the bangs going like that, with my hair all short, and I wanted to dye it black with my bangs being pink. I remember that very vividly, and that was when I was like 6. And I remember always, being head over heels for characters that were alternative within cartoons, like Gwen from Total Drama Island or Sam from Danny Phantom. Oh, Raven from Teen Titans was like what I wanted to be always. So, examples. That's how I kind of got into certain things, though that wasn't the whole story. So yeah, I understand it can be difficult to get out or start out. People are scared about it being too expensive too, which I think is, it's a valid reason for being a little bit nervous. This is just an introduction video. I'm talking very broadly about alternative subcultures as a whole, and because of that, I'm gonna make videos that go more into specific subcultures. I'll make a video that, kind of introduces people to punk and goth and emo and scene. I'm gonna do other subcultures too, because subcultures as a whole really interest me. So you'll see a Lolita video eventually. You might see a Ganguro video eventually. It all depends on, what I decide to do and what time I have. But the videos I make will be on the music, ideologies, and styles, and, all that. So, regardless, let's continue on to kind of a recap of everything and some more information about alternative subcultures. Most important part about starting out, I think, is really educating yourself. It can be really difficult to find reliable information and, asking alt people, because people can be worried they're going to be judged. I'd say the community is really welcoming, but you always have those bad apples who are going to be jerks to new people. And even I consider myself a new person, because even though I got interested into alt subcultures from, forever, I really only started dressing it and listening to the music when I was in 4th grade, and it's been, slowly building up as I get older. And I'm only 17 now, so it hasn't been that long. Hopefully my videos will help, because I'm not going to be judgmental. I will tell people if they're wrong, but I won't be judgmental. I will try to be as respectful as I can. Anyways, educating yourself on the music, ideologies, fashion, that's the big thing. Fashion is what I think a lot of people find intimidating. I want to say this now, that you don't have to dress alternative to be alternative. And that's a bit of a controversial opinion, I'm sure. But when you're just starting out, it can be expensive to buy new clothes. And even if you're thrifting, it can still be expensive. And if you're with a strict family, that can be expensive. Or not expensive, but emotionally taxing if they're going to be judgmental of you or strict on you. So I don't think you fully need to dress alternative. I think, that can be a goal. But I think it's really important to educate yourself on the ideologies, the music, and the movements around the subculture. I think that's a lot more important than dressing alternative. I think dressing an alternative is a big part, and that's what we associate with those subcultures, but it's really about the music, the movements, and the ideologies. With the fashion in particular, there's a lot of names that are thrown around within the alt subculture of brands. You have Restyle, Demonia, Killstar, and a whole bunch more. And the names can sound intimidating because you go to the websites and the clothes are expensive and you're like, I can't afford this. And that's completely understandable. You feel pressured to get it, and it's kind of like you realize it's not as easy as you thought. And I think a lot of people nowadays have forgotten that alternative subcultures started around thrifting and DIYing your clothes. You can basically get any black shirt from a thrift store, some fishnet tights, and DIY it into something that looks, edgy, something that looks cool, alternative. And I think that's one of the best things about the subcultures, is that it's encouraged that you go thrifting and that you DIY your clothes. I mean, you get safety pins, you can get studs, all of the above, and you'll make it work. It takes a few trial and error, but once you figure out what you want and how to do it, it's relatively easy and cheap to get new clothes. So I think the fashion is actually more easy than people think. because it just seems intimidating. And in certain areas, thrift stores, at least in my experience, might not have things you really think you can work with. You don't always need to, worry much about the brand names. It's not something really all people care about, I think. It's always nice to get your first pair of demonias, and it's always nice to finally get, some fancy piece of clothing from one of the bigger brands, but regardless of that, it's not needed. You can always thrift, you can always, make do with what you have. You can always reuse clothes. You can even buy clothing dye and dye shirts that you like but aren't black. You can dye them black. You can pair other colors with black too. It doesn't need to be all black. I definitely like to wear colors. That's kind of like a basic, thing. Some pretty quick and obvious pointers. Not all alt people worship Satan or are into witchcraft. Some people are, and that's their decision, but that's not necessarily because they're alt. Being alt is not about glorifying death or worshiping Satan or being a witch. That is not what being alternative is. It is more about the music and the subculture in general, like the ideologies and movements surrounding it. I just thought I should point that out. It's welcome to all religions, all races. It's not exclusive to anyone. It's just entirely inclusive. And I don't know why people think it isn't. Some people within the alternative community try to say that it isn't, which is just... Anyways, it's also not just a fashion statement, as I've basically explained throughout this entire video. And the stereotypes associated with it can be really harmful and untrue. Perpetuating that you have to do certain unsavory things just because you joined the subculture is just wrong. You don't have to do drugs if you get into alternative subcultures. You don't have to cut or self-harm or anything like that. That's not encouraged. It shouldn't be encouraged. You're gonna find people that do those things, but I mean, that's not a requirement, and that should be a well-known fact. So those were just the obvious pointers. Little recap. Alt subcultures are great. I'd recommend getting into them if you're interested, but you need to do your research. Hopefully I'll help that with, making videos. That's all the time I have for now, so correct me if information is wrong. Comment if you have any ideas for what to make. I do want to say I'm not only going to make videos about alternative stuff, I really like video games, so I'm probably going to do some videos about video games, maybe some anime stuff. It all depends, but it'll happen when it happens. I'm doing this for fun. So goodbye for now. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.